Did you order the murder of Jamal Khashoggi?
بلا شك لا.
Absolutely not. This was a heinous crime. But I take full responsibility as a leader in Saudi Arabia, especially since it was committed by individuals working for the Saudi government. Today, the investigations are being carried out. And once charges are proven against someone, regardless of their rank, it will be taken to court. No exception made. If there is any such information that charges me, I hope it is brought forward publicly.
It's the Crown Prince of Saudi Arabia on 60 Minutes 3 days ago. And exactly 1 year ago today, Washington Post columnist and legal U.S. resident Jamal Khashoggi walked into the Saudi consulate in Istanbul, Turkey, believing he was there to obtain documents needed for his marriage. Minutes later, he was dead at the hands of Saudi agents. Joining us now, editorial page editor and columnist overseeing the Washington Post opinion section, Fred Hiatt, and columnist and associate editor for the Washington Post, David Ignatius, to commemorate the solemn anniversary of their colleague's murder. The Washington Post is out today with a special expanded opinion section featuring a collection of op-eds and special coverage. Gentlemen, thanks for being with us this morning. Fred, let me start with you. I want to get your reflections on Jamal, but first just your reaction to that interview on 60 Minutes where the Crown Prince said, "I did not order the murder of your colleague Jamal Khashoggi, but I take responsibility as the head of the government here." What's your reaction?
Good morning. My reaction is he's actually doing exactly the opposite of taking responsibility. Everybody who's looked at this seriously, including the UN rapporteur and the U.S. intelligence agencies, have concluded that a crime of this magnitude committed by people so close to the Crown Prince could not have taken place without the knowledge and support of the very top of the government. And if he were really taking responsibility, he would be allowing these investigations to take place with transparency. He would be telling us, among other things, where Jamal's body is, which we've never learned. And so he's really doing the opposite. The cover-up has continued.
David, of course, the CIA concluded that it was, in fact, the Crown Prince who ordered this murder of Jamal Khashoggi. Your colleague, the president, and his colleagues have cast doubt around the White House on that conclusion, continuing to do regular business with MBS. But more broadly this morning on this solemn anniversary, what are your thoughts about Jamal Khashoggi, David?
Willie, the Saudis, from the very top, we do believe Mohammed bin Salman, the Crown Prince, tried to silence a critic who was angering them. They'd been angry at Jamal Khashoggi for more than a year. They'd talked about various ways to silence him. And finally it came down to this, silencing him by killing him. We think he was choked, and then his body was dismembered brutally. A year later, we're still talking about him. If they thought they were going to silence this voice, silence this criticism of the kingdom, of repressive policies, the opposite has happened. I think that's one of the powerful things about the special section that Fred has pulled together is you hear voices from all over the Middle East expressing the same ideas about a more open society that our colleague Jamal expressed in his column. So if they wanted to silence him, it didn't happen.
David, Fred, it's Richard Haas here. Clearly the Saudis were hoping that this general statement about accepting responsibility would somehow allow them to turn the corner. As you make clear, it will not. What now, though, a year later, turning to policy, should the United States do? MBS is going to quite likely to be the effective leader of Saudi Arabia for years, possibly decades. It's an important country and obviously a critical part of the world. You don't need me to explain that to you. What does the United States do when he is essentially the person, like it or not, who's in a position of power?
David?
Richard, just to start, I think Saudi Arabia and MBS, the Crown Prince, need to take steps to assure the United States that whatever happened, and we do want to know the truth, it will never happen again, that there are systems in place that really make for a more reliable, less erratic decision-making. One way to do that, obviously, would be to have a genuinely transparent process. At this point, the person who we think, our intelligence agencies think, was most directly responsible for this plot an aide named Saad al-Qahtani has not even been brought into the legal process, not part of the trial. That's a start if MBS wants to be taken seriously. More generally, we should say to the Saudis, if you want American military aid, if you want us to back you up and defend you against Iran, you need to understand our basic standards. You need to come clean about this. It just needs to be a different relationship than the one we've had.
Fred, John Meacham here. You're in the business of connecting dots, and without being hyperbolic, and I don't mean the question to be hyperbolic, could you talk about the climate about dissent and a free press in the United States, and what the murder of your colleague suggests about the ultimate stakes of that kind of crackdown on a climate of dissent, not just in Saudi Arabia, but around the world?
I mean, I think if you step back, you think this was an extraordinary crime. An American resident, a columnist for an American newspaper, lured into a diplomatic compound in a different country from his own, and deliberately murdered there. If we had a normal American government and Secretary of State committed to American values, they would be saying, we need a full accounting of what happened. We need accountability for what happened before we can move on in any way, because otherwise the implications are really chilling. No journalist anywhere in the world is going to be safe, even in diplomatic compounds, which traditionally are supposed to be the place of shelter, and in any country. And then above that, you have the kind of language we're hearing about fake news and that there is no truth and that the press is the enemy of the people. And that kind of language coming from our own president reverberates and is welcomed by autocrats like MBS around the world. Reporters become endangered everywhere, and truth and the journalism we all depend on to find out what's happening in the world also becomes endangered.
All right, well,
very well put.
Fred Hiatt and David Ignatius, thank you for being with us on this very solemn occasion. And Fred, I'm going to start writing my columns again when I finally finish my book. Unfortunately, I'm using the barnacle method, which is, it's free form. I write a word a day, so it may take...
No. You'll get it done.
We're saving a space for you, Joe.
All right. Thank you so much, Fred. And again, thank you so much for being here, remembering your colleague.
Thanks
Still
for having
ahead,
me.
the Inspector General of the State Department is set to give an urgent briefing on Capitol Hill today, and that urgent briefing concerns Ukraine. Meanwhile, Secretary of State Mike Pompeo is in Italy right now and is expected to take questions at any moment. Of course, judging by his last few performances in front of the press, we wonder whether we have to apply the Lewandowski standard to him, because he, like Corey, obviously doesn't feel any responsibility to tell the truth to Americans. We'll be right back.
Thanks for checking out MSNBC on YouTube, and make sure you subscribe to stay up to date on the day's biggest stories. And you can click on any of the videos around us to watch more from Morning Joe and MSNBC. Thanks so much for watching.